Good morning. Thank you for being here. As you know, on January the 18th, Bruce McArthur was arrested. He has been charged with 7 counts of first-degree murder in relation to the deaths of Salim Essen, Andrew Kinsman, Kirushna Mahmoodi, Dean Lisowick, Majid Kaihan, Skanda Navaratnam, and Abdul Basir Faizi. One of the focuses of the investigation has been on human remains found within planters from Mallory Crescent. I have previously stated that the remains of at least 7 individuals have been located within these planters. The remains of Andrew Kinsman, Kirushna Mahmoodi, Skanda Navaratnam, Salim Essen, Dean Lisowick, and Abdul Basir Faizi had previously been identified. One set of remains had been unidentified. I can now report that the remains have been identified as Kirushna Kumar Kanagaratnam. Mr. Kanagaratnam arrived in Canada in 2010 from Sri Lanka and lived in the Scarborough area of Toronto. He was not on file as missing, and we have no prior evidence which would link him to the gay village. We believe that Mr. Kanagaratnam was murdered between the time period of September 3rd to December 14th, 2015. Mr. Kanagaratnam was born in 1978 and would have been 37 years old at the time of his murder. Mr. Kanagaratnam is the male depicted in the previously released John Doe photograph. The identification was confirmed with assistance from an international government agency. Today, Mr. McArthur was brought back before the courts. He was charged with first-degree murder in relation to Mr. Kanagaratnam. Bruce McArthur is now charged with and alleged to have committed 8 murders. I really want to take the time today to acknowledge the work of the officers on Project Prism. We knew that eventually they would get the job done and would identify this 8th victim. The stress and anxiety over dealing with hundreds of tips, hundreds of missing person occurrences, and dozens of potential identifications for the 8th victim has been enormous. While we are saddened, we are also tremendously proud and relieved to have been able to bring closure to the friends and family of Mr. Kanagaratnam and the 7 other victims. I want to thank those who have come forward with their tips. If anyone has not heard from us or they have information related to Mr. McArthur, please call us at the Homicide Squad or anonymously through Crime Stoppers.
Detective Sergeant Nzenga, when you say you were able to identify him with the help of an international agency, can you elaborate?
I can't. I'm not going to say which mechanism we've utilized. I have stated in the past that we've used fingerprints, DNA, and dental records to identify these victims, and that's as specific as I can get.
You said that he wasn't reported missing, but you're happy to bring closure to his family. Can you comment on what his family's reaction was to this? Like, were they wondering why he lost contact over the years? Was it, like, what have they been feeling over the years, and what was their reaction to this news?
We're still dealing with the family and getting as much information as we can from them. The family, the direct family, is not in Canada, and we've had to utilize a Tamil-speaking officer to get some information. We're still working on that, so we're getting more and more into the background of how long he's been missing and what their reaction was to that.
Where did those photos come from?
Sorry?
Where did the photo come from?
Again, as I've said before, I'm not going to specify exactly where that photograph came from.
Where are dates from? Do you have the dates from 2015? There's like a...
Sorry, hang on.
Sorry.
Where is he from?
He's from Sri Lanka.
How long was he in Toronto?
On the information today, you also mentioned that there's a period in which you believe he was murdered. How did you come to that period?
I can't speak to that. There's some records that we have which have helped us narrow that time period down, but I can't get specific about what those records are. He was not one of the 22 tips, no. They did.
Detective, can you just talk about the victim's history in Canada? Was he a resident or a citizen, or how long had he been here?
I'm not going to speak specifically to his status in Canada. I will say that he came to Canada from Sri Lanka in 2010.
Okay, you said that, so he's not one of the 22 tips, but last week you were talking about being cautiously optimistic about one of those 22. This is not that one then.
Correct.
And so can you just tell us what happened between the time of your news conference, which was last, Tuesday or Wednesday, and then Thursday when you identified him? Did something happen very quickly at that point? Because I thought it took a while to get the DNA confirmation anyway.
Well, again, I'm not going to speak specifically about what mechanism we utilized to identify Mr. Kanagaratnam, but I will say it was just some very diligent, good police work by some of the officers assigned to PRISM, doing some follow-up, and they managed to come through with this identification.
Was he on your radar before last Wednesday?
No.
He's never been reported missing by anyone, either in 2010 or either in the last year or so. Never reported missing at all.
He was not on file in Canada as missing, and I'm going to leave it at that. We're still following up on
Does he have any
specifics.
family in Canada?
That he wasn't or hasn't been at this point connected to the Dave Village. What does that say to you?
I don't know yet. He doesn't quite fit the profile that we've seen before. Even with Mr. Lisowick, we didn't have any direct connection right off the bat, but eventually we did find a connection. Whether that comes true with Mr. Kanagaratnam or not, I just don't know yet.
How is it that he came in contact?
From Sri Lanka, does that tell you anything specifically? Is there anything you can delineate from that?
Not really, no.
Was he a refugee here that may have had his application denied?
Again, I'm not going to comment on his immigration status here.
Did
What
you
do you
have,
believe that he came in contact with Bruce McArthur?
We don't know.
did you have any family here?
He had some, not direct family, but some distant family,
Like
yes.
cousins, that sort of thing?
Yes,
In the GTA?
in the GTA,
Did he
yes.
have an online dating profile at all that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Were you able to get some help from that family within the GTA? Like that could help you with a DNA profile, right?
It could. I wouldn't want to rely on a distant cousin for a DNA profile, but that could potentially help us, yes.
Detective Sergeant, do you believe this victim and any others were stabbed to death, or do you believe they were choked to death? We ask only because someone that may have known this individual believes the family has been told he was stabbed to death, and is that important in the investigation as far as past cases for MOs?
I don't have that information. I don't know where the family would have come into possession of that information.
Other than telling us he's 37 and he's from Scarborough and moved here in 2010, what else can you tell us about this victim?
That's about all I can tell you about him right now. We've just identified him very recently. We've spent the weekend contacting family. We're working on more background, but that's all that we have right now.
Do you agree with the shelter system at all, similar to Timor?
Not that we know of yet.
What does that mean for your investigation that, you've got members of the LGBTQ community involved in this, we have people who frequent the shelters involved, and now a completely different individual. How much larger of a net now does your investigation need to be possible?
Well, we're still working through any outstanding missing persons occurrence in Toronto. We're still working through quite a few cold cases, murder cases from Toronto. But obviously, you're right. This does create basically a wide open net. And we've had lots of calls, international calls, since our pleas began for people who just haven't seen family members in years. And I'll reiterate, if you have any information whatsoever that can help us out and somewhere that you'd like us to look, then give us a call and let us know about that. We can't have the information if people don't provide it to us.
You said last week that you had at least the remains of 7 people pulled from the planters. Do you still think that you might have the remains of more people, or do you think that you've identified all of the remains now?
I don't know yet. As I've stated before, these remains are dismembered. Actually putting these remains together and definitively linking one part of the remains to another is still a work in progress.
So is it puzzling to you that this last alleged victim that you've identified doesn't fit the profile of the others, that all had this connection to the village, even if some of them were leading a double life? At least we knew they had contacted McArthur through perhaps a gay app or dating site.
Well, it's like I said, it's definitely something that we're still looking at to see if we can make that connection. I don't know if we ever will, but the fact of the matter is that we do have his remains positively identified in the same planters as all the other victims. So,
Is this consistent, Detective Sergeant, with, there was a theory put out there, and I apologize if it wasn't you, but someone that he would, MacArthur would allegedly look for people who would be less reported missing, perhaps less quickly, or had less ties to the community, perhaps victims who would be more isolated?
That's a possibility. I think there's enough information out there on the backgrounds of most of these individuals that people can draw their own conclusions on that. So whether it ever becomes an issue in court or not, I don't know.
You said it was a second burial site of some kind. Is that correct? That you identified all 7 of the, you identified 7 remains in the planters. That leaves one person whose remains is not there. Do you think there is a second location?
Well, I don't know if the remains of that one person are there or not. We're looking at more locations. We've got a lot of searches still to do. I stated last week, as the weather gets warmer, we are going to search more locations, and whether we find anything else or not, I just don't know yet.
Detective, in previous news conferences, you've talked about having to go further and further back in older and older cases. Can you just talk about that a little bit in terms of how far back are you looking, what kind of cold cases, what kind of missing persons reports are you looking at, what kind of timeline are you looking at?
Well, I said last week that we're looking at a series of cold cases from the 1970s. I believe the earliest one is 1975. There was a gentleman here last week who brought up some cases from 1967 and 1968. We're not looking at those ones. We're aware of them, but we're not looking at them. So right now, the furthest back we're going to is 1975.